welcome again. This is day 3 by UAE time, United Arab Emirates time, 7 p.m. By British summer time, 4 p.m. In England at the moment, people are complaining that it's too hot. I think they don't know how hot it could be. I would imagine it's quite a lot hotter in Dubai and elsewhere where you're watching this from. But I'm recording this and holding this class with you, and I'm broadcasting from a hotel just outside Arundel on the south coast of England. Okay, I hope you can all hear me. At the moment, I think we've just lost someone. At the moment, I can only see 3 students: Azwathi, Kameri, and Suchi. Let me just check. Participants, yes, and then I'll check the chat box. And I'll put in here, I hope all 3 of you can hear me, and if you can say yes or no, I would appreciate it. Oh, thank you, Kamere. I've got a good evening, sir, to you, Suchi, as well. If you're a gentleman, or good evening, madam, if you are a lady. Yes. Oh, thank you most kindly. Okay. And the third person was Azwathi. Oh, and we've now got Trost as well. Excellent. Trost has very kindly submitted his ethics answer, and I will do something similar to what I did yesterday in going through it and trying to point out how well he's done. I think it seems to be working quite well. I would encourage you all to do lots of homework, but if we're able to learn from Trost's work, then that's excellent. Okay. And as well, thank you. You can hear me. Good. Now I've got share screen. We'll whiz through the first couple of slides, and then I'll switch across to Trost's homework, and we'll review it. So there we are, very similar to the first 2. Slide class number 3, 20th of July. These are the same 2 slides as we had yesterday and the day before. Evaluation of a new project, funding, etc. is our issue. I think I would take... Right, on to the next then. We're going to review the homework. Just in case, let me quickly remind you of the task. Cobot is the name of a collaborative robot, and we are assuming that Spark Space is manufacturing them, and there's been a malfunction in one of them that's caused serious injuries to an employee of a customer, and we are aware that this is the kind of fault that we may well find on other cobots that we have been producing, because it is something to do with the way in which we set them up. So although we haven't visited them yet, this may well be applicable to 4 other clients, and we've got 2 other systems that are going through and are nearly completed in the factory, and then we've got no other malfunction has happened. We have to prepare us to present to the board, and I suggested that there's a little bit of background, that we've got quite a few members of staff and directors who say, well, let's not do anything about it. fair enough, we'll deal with our existing client who's had the problem, but we don't really want to recall the others or send out engineers to them because it's expensive. Whereas other members of staff and other directors are advocating that we do the opposite. I suggested that this would be about what I would consider a task or an element. In other words, I think that this would be half of a section, and in that respect it would be something where you'd have about 22.5 minutes and it would be worth about 12.5 marks. So hopefully you've all had a go at this, although I'm only going to go through trusts. 5 minutes of planning time, maybe slightly more. I think as you become more and more proficient, you can actually allocate more time to the planning and less time to the writing, because there's so much intensive thought that goes on when you plan your answers. And then about 17.5 minutes to write the answer. And that was the sound of me having a little bit of coffee and putting my cup down. Now, let's continue sharing my screen, and I've set this up, but I haven't read it yet. So I'll get my stamps ready. I certainly recommended, and I continue to recommend, that you use headings, that you can use the same headings that you actually put in your plan, and then you just spell it out. I don't have a problem with you actually having a heading that says what the issue is. Anyway, I can show you. I'll very briefly show you, just in case you missed this, that these are the headings that I would certainly have as a generic approach to ethics questions. What the issue is, what makes it an ethical issue, a short paragraph on the commercial or legal implications, because we understand that they are not ethical issues. Commercial and legal implications are different. Ethical issues are simply about doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Commercial issues are doing the thing that's best for us in terms of our commercial success. Legal things are doing what's best for us in terms of our legal obligations. Ethical is about doing the right thing because it is the right thing to do. Okay, let's now see. The issue is the recent malfunctioning of the cobot installed in the client's company, which has caused serious injury to a fitter. Right. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit here so that I hope that this is a help. Let me go back now. Just delete that for a minute. In we go with a typewriter. Because there is more to the issue than that, it's also okay. So our issue is, what are we going to do about it? What is it that we're going to do? Now, there's oh, sorry, I've managed to shrink that by accident. Does Trost earn any marks for this? Well, yesterday my criticism was in terms of application. Here, I think my criticism is that it's part there but not fully there. So in that respect, this earns a half mark. It's good in terms of application, but it's missing the what do we do next. One of the ethical issues raised is if Sparkspace has shown an appropriate duty of care in this regard. Fitters in Sparkspace seem to have relied on the claim of perfect safety in performing their tasks with the cobot. Sadly, the fitter with serious injury may have also relied on this and hence calls to question the duty of care Sparkspace shows to its employees. Okay, there's a slight inconsistency here. So let me just draw attention to that, because initially when I paused, I was thinking, has the question been ambiguous? But the inconsistency is that is here. The client company employ a fitter who's been injured. So it's not a Sparkspace employee who's been injured, it's the fitter who works for the client. But yes, we have got the issue of the duty of care, and I think that this is sufficiently good that it earns a full mark. Yes, if we've got this perfect safety record, and if we are promoting our cobots as suitable for us to rely on the automated adjustment of the equipment so that it doesn't injure anybody if they climb in, then yes, we are letting them down. We are letting down the client, and we're letting down the employee of the client. So in that case, we do owe them a duty of care, and as such, we have breached that duty of care. So there is an opportunity here for a second paragraph, and I think that is my comment here, that and of course the next paragraph would earn another mark. Let's press on. Yet another ethical issue is integrity. With this incident, questions as to the honesty of Sparkspace claims with the use of machines arises. Excellent. So, Trost, you've done very well here, and I hope you can all see this, that we've got this first sentence, and as I was encouraging you, excellent, very short sentence, brilliant. You've identified the issue. Integrity, honesty, doing the right thing, and here, are we being honest when we claim that the machine will do the various automated alteration when it senses somebody in there, and it hasn't. So, especially with similar faults noticed with other client systems, the integrity of SparkSpace reliability claims may become quite doubtful. Exactly. We are, and always with CIMA questions, we always take the moral high ground. So wrongful claim, is it just that we are giving the wrongful claim because of deliberate trying to misleading? Deliberate misrepresentation, or lack of thorough quality checking. And interestingly, there's been something similar with the cars that have now come on the road where the driver doesn't actually have to drive because the cars will drive themselves. But there was an incident in California about 3 weeks ago where one of these cars, where it's had all the claims that it wasn't going to knock anybody over and anything else, did, because there was an element that had happened. I think it was a pedestrian or a cyclist had got in the way, and the car hadn't recognised it, and so that person was injured. And similarly here, if there's been a lack of thorough quality checking, then I suspect, but I don't know, that may well be what has happened. But either way round, we have let our client down, and we should be behaving with absolute integrity. So, and if we've noticed similar faults, I must admit, I will relate this back to something I said yesterday. I hadn't picked up on the fact that we had noticed this elsewhere, but we could have done. And for that reason, I'll do exactly what your examiner will do, which is to give the full mark, because it could be true. Now, loss of brand name and goodwill. So we've got commercial implications. I think Trust has done very well here, because I made a fuss of this yesterday. You must keep the non-ethical aspects, the commercial and legal, completely separate from the ethical. This is a commercial implication, or this has commercial implications. Such failures can lead to damaged reputation with SparkSpace clients. This is especially critical as SparkSpace has a strong, well-recognised brand and quite a substantial goodwill on its SFP and on the HPC as well. If not checked, the reputational damage can lead to severe financial consequences that could lead to loss of clients. Excellent. So, a very good paragraph there, and that earns the full mark. Another implication is that affected employees can commence legal cases in courts against SparkSpace. Yes, and more so as there is no written evidence of insurance from injury from use of SparkSpace. This could lead to huge fines from. Well, it could. So let's have another mark there as well. So I hope you are all seeing the benefit of this, because I think that this is a good way of doing it. Right, gross negligence with Code of Ethics. As per CIMA Code of Ethics, which expects its members to act with professional competence due to care. Normally it's called due care attention, but anyway, and integrity. these injuries may show gross negligence with regards to expected ethics with regard to the professional. Okay. I hope this is going to be helpful. This is going to get a little bit of criticism from me. It's probably got a basis that could be earning marks, but I'm going to put in here too vague to meet the standard needed to earn marks. You need to be very specific, and here we've got a little bit of something that the examiners don't always like, which is the attempt to show off that you know the code of ethics without really applying them. Sure, there may well be an element of gross negligence, but we would need to justify that. And also, gross negligence in itself is a legal term rather than an ethical term. So when we think about the idea of not demonstrating integrity, then we're thinking in terms of ethical aspects. When we think about being negligent, then we're being negligent within a legal definition of negligence. But apart from that, this has been a well-structured answer, and it's doing well. While it may be expensive for Sparkface, in the interest of shareholders, to immediately halt operations with its Cobalt machines. I'm going to underline that word immediately, because immediately is exactly what short-term means. And so this is a good start. And this may be the ethical right thing to do. Well, I think that you need to be quite blunt and say, we must do this because this will ensure, or to ensure, that when the two machines that are being produced at the moment are delivered to their customers, then then they won't have the fault that caused the fitter to be injured. So this will enable to carry out a troubleshoot of all faulty Cobalt machines with a view to finding and rectifying root causes of the malfunctions. Excellent. And okay, all right. There's a little bit of implication there as well, which is also good. But I'll just add something on the end here. Which is just out of our mind, would enable them to carry out. I know what I've just typed, and there was something that went straight through my mind when I did it, but I think in terms of this answer, then yes, it's quite right. The machines will then be delivered free of the fault, and we could then ensure that fitters will not be injured in the future, because that's what we're doing. I think that the next paragraph is going to go on about the inconvenience that we will put the client to, and I think that that's excellent. But let's give this the tick. It is stop the machines, get this thing sorted, and then we'll start the machines again, so that we are sort of stop our manufacturing machines to make sure that these cobalt machines that we're making are being made in a way that is perfect. Good. Smart Space could provide clients with alternative means to continue production process in the assembly line by providing human labour to ensure continuity of production. That might be a little bit tricky, but it's showing a contingency. Excellent. I'm going to put a different type of comment, which is as a tip, I suggest okay. One of the things that I always encourage you to do when you're writing recommendations is that you write the recommendations, you write the justification of a recommendation and an action plan, but also that you give the implications. Invariably, one of the implications of a recommendation is that there's going to be some sort of cost. Well, here the cost is to the client that they would have not have the machine on the day that they want it, but a few days later. And so what I'm saying is that it's good to show the contingency arrangement, but also it makes it very easy for the examiner to give you marks if you spell out that we are causing a delay. Good. Continuing with this, though this may incur some additional costs, good. This may show to clients that Spark Space is concerned about their business as partners. And then we're moving into a little bit of commercial benefit, but did you hear this sort of? But I will. Okay, so I've just written a little thing in italics there. Be careful not to move into commercial concerns. Smart Space should also explore possibility to work with the client if required to ensure that the right medical attention is given to the injured fitter. This is a CSR and ethical requirement that Smart Space would need to show. Okay. Of course, corporate social responsibility and ethical aspects are a matter of our choice, but they are something which we do because it's the right thing to do. Let's go back. There was certainly a mark coming in for the recognition of a contingency. Okay. Right, long-term recommendations. So we should implement a detailed project review on the use of cobot. This review should look into the entire design and manufacture of cobot to ascertain possible defaults, errors during the design and manufacturing process. I'm not sure whether the word default there is the right one. You can tell me I'm being overly fussy, but I think we really mean the word fault. And good. So we start off by reviewing our production process because we know that we've got something that isn't quite right. There should also be a review of the process used in working with the cobot. So it may be that we're not giving these fitters the right instructions. A claim of perfect safety, it needs to be reviewed. Additional measures in the working instructions need to be put in place to prevent the possibility of injury with the cobot. This is good. This is very good. And Spark Space may want to explore in conjunction with clients the need for insurance for fitters working with the cobot. Well, there is a need for insurance, but let's keep going. This may, though, raise questions in the mind of clients with the reliability of the machines, the insurance with the use of machines, or even motor vehicles assure the user of extreme duty of care and the slimmest possibility of malfunction. You can hear me mulling it over, I think, when I'm sort of kissing my lips and all the rest of it. As you can probably guess, I'm not quite as impressed with this paragraph as I was with the previous ones. Machine insurance or fitter insurance. Right. The idea. Where's my typing? The idea makes sense, but I think. Now, this is useful from a learning point of view because it's an opportunity for me to show that I haven't given a mark for this, and the examiner wouldn't give a mark for something. The examiner's looking to give you marks for realistic answers. Now, if you think about it, the insurance aspect is one of the ways in which we transfer a risk. Remember we talked about TARA. Transfer, accept, reduce and avoid. My interpretation of this, and I think the examiner's interpretation of this paragraph, is that we're actually saying that the fitters can continue to work with the cobot, and if they get injured, well, they get a payout because of the insurance. That isn't the kind of solution that CIMA would like, and and what I would say is the aspect of TARA that would, well, there's two aspects, but I think avoid is probably not the one, that would earn marks are for reduce. So T is T for transfer, R is R for reduce. The idea is that we can't simply accept the risk and just keep putting fitters in there and paying them off with insurance claims. We need to reduce the risk of them being injured, or avoid completely and just not put them in that risky situation. Okay. I think that the avoid rather defeats the point of having cobots and so on. So the avoid method would be one where you turn the machine off completely before the engineer goes in. Okay. So let me just quickly sum up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8.5. 8.5, I think you can be very proud of that. I'll go a little bit down the bottom. 8.5 out of 12.5 is a high mark. I want me to get to where I want to be, so let me try again. Okay. Oh, maybe I just miss off the underline. So I'm sure that there are very many of you who can very quickly tell me what that is as a percentage. It's an eighth of 100, isn't it? 864. 69%. So the more 69% marks you get on your exam, the better. Covers for areas where you might find problems. Right, let me see. Klaus, thank you very much, and I hope everybody else and here's my promise to you. If you didn't find that useful, then please tell me. I actually think it is a good thing from everybody's point of view, but I don't want to find that we get to the 5th class and we do a review of your comments on what you thought of me, and this is one of the things that you criticise me for. If you don't like it, then please say so, and I can modify what I do next week. But I think it's a very good way of doing things, and if we have the best of setups, in other words, if we were face to face, I'd probably be expecting you to hand in homework every time, and everybody to hand in homework, so that you're able to get that kind of a feedback. Excellent. Right, let's move swiftly back. That was the homework. I thought I'd quickly look at possible ethical issues. I know that we're sort of running into 40 minutes of this class, and we have got a fair bit to do on the next area. But within the notes, and you can have a copy of these, you've got two ways of getting them. Either you get them from the Dropbox that Andrew set up, or you email me and I email them on to you. But that's my email address. Yes, I think. There were a few ethical issues that I thought could get tested in your exam. All right, the next one was something that I'm going to gloss over again, but this was we looked at corporate governance, and so there were a number of things I thought that you could just check that you still can remember from yesterday. The 3 committees, the proportion of directors that should be NEDs, and who corporate governance is there to protect. And I know that I've made that third question a little bit. I'm not entirely happy with the third question, but I hope that you've recognised that it's there, firstly, to protect the shareholders, but it's also there to protect and to show the company's commitment to all their stakeholders. And I know that we include our competitors as stakeholders, but certainly the wider community type stakeholder, the employees. I mean, very interestingly, in the UK, there's a new Prime Minister. She was only appointed last week, but she has already been talking about boards of directors having members of staff, employees, employee board members. So this is something which is currently being discussed within the UK, and given that a large proportion of the markers of the management case study are UK based, they will be familiar with that as well. But certainly corporate governance is there, A, for the shareholders, and B, really for all the other stakeholders as well. Now, today's class, 43 minutes in, is looking at evaluation of new projects and funding, etc. So when I was going through the pre-scene material, here we are, pre-scene material, I've come across quite a few aspects that could well spark I'm using the word spark in a slightly different sense, but Spark Space may well have several different things that they would consider that would be possible capital investment projects. And I thought that on page 7 there was a particular area here that I thought, I wonder why they've given us this, but the Spark Space assembly lines are near 100% capacity, and backlogs can build when any significant HPC configuration orders are placed. Well, they have to address that. That's the problem, and we may well be asked to do that, possibly using outsourcing, or we may have a capital investment project in order to address that. So I am pretty sure that there's going to be something. So here we are, the assembly line's near 100% capacity, backlogs build, expansion of the production line. We could be taking over another company. We may launch a new type of server. And before I move on and look at the syllabus component and look at the other things that are likely to be in the examiner's mind when they write the questions, what I want to make a big deal out of is that we really think about Spark Space. This isn't capital investment appraisal and examples. This is Spark Space having a capital investment appraisal project, because this is a fast moving industry, and one of the things that you must be thinking about, I know I'm being very bullying you, but I want you to pass, and if you think about servers and you think about how this industry is changing all the time, very fast moving in terms of the technological development, if they're going to come up with a new product, they're not going to have a very long product life cycle. So they need to be appraising capital investment projects over quite a short period of time, because what they then need to recognise is that in a few years the whole technological environment, the whole of pestel analysis, the T bit of pestel analysis is changing so much that it may be that we come up with a fantastic new project, and it's going to enable us to generate lots of cash flows into the future, but that future is not likely to be very long if another bit of technology comes along and changes the whole landscape. So I would be looking for short horizons in terms of the plans. We'll come back to this when I have gone through what was done, what the syllabus is saying, and then what sort of things were tested in May. But I think that that's very important, that you must be thinking Spark Space first, capital investment second. Right, let's have a look at the syllabus content. We've got two areas in the syllabus basically. We've got the P2 area of long-term decision making, which is the bigger of the two deals. Here we have to look at the evaluation of information to support project appraisal, and we have to discuss the financial consequences of dealing with long-term projects, time value of money, and we saw somewhere yesterday there was the aspect of sensitivity analysis as well. But here, evaluate investment appraisal techniques and explain their results. So remember that we are looking at an exam where the CIMA are on record as saying that you can get very high marks and not have to do any sums at all. Sure, you might have to do some sums, but what you might choose to, but you don't have to do any. And then a little bit on pricing strategies. Well, fine. Now, the indicative content, and I know that yesterday some of you found things like this a little bit tricky in terms of the writing is very small, but this has come straight from the syllabus. So we're dealing with relevant tax flows taking account of tax and inflation, other factors, and the use of perpetuities to derive final project value where appropriate. So you would almost certainly be given the result of the calculations. It's possible you might be given some calculations that have got the errors of principle. You won't be given calculations where they've got numerical errors, because you wouldn't necessarily find them without doing lots of sums. But there could be errors of principle. The identification and integration of non-financial factors in long-term decisions. Definitely the idea of why we might be prepared to have a project that perhaps has a small negative net present value at the outset, but we've got something else in mind later on, which effectively is a non-financial factor, which would justify accepting an NPV which is negative. The process of investment decision making, the origination of proposals, creation of budgets, go or no-go decisions, qualitative issues such as what I was looking at, discounting, when you've got projects with unequal lives, how you are able to compare those. They don't stand out to me in this particular case, because unless we were buying a company that was able to produce similar sorts of servers, and we would then have to figure out whether we compare two different projects or more than two different projects with different lives, and the fact that we would need to use the annualized rate in that case to overcome the unequal lives. And here you would just be explaining that you use the annuity rate and you divide the total by the appropriate annuity rate for that particular number of years. But I do think that a very basic explanation of a project in terms of real options is quite possible, because it's quite possible that they may well come up with a project where they're going to do a bit of capital investment for the government of Northland or Southland, and although initially it looks as if the net present value is a bit marginal, because it gives them the real option, in other words, an option rather like a financial option, but this time a real investment option of being able to perhaps do more work for that particular government, but they don't have to. That's what I mean by option, that they've got the opportunity to have a follow-on investment after they've done their initial project. Then it may well be worth doing the initial project just to be able to have the opportunity to choose whether they then do a later one. So do remember the idea of follow-on investments, abandoning, and the other one, which is the wait. And these three are the three ways forward from a real option. And you can track back and add the appropriate net present value, which would then turn a marginal net present value into a distinct positive net present value and justify the initial decision. In May, I don't think these were tested, but they certainly could be tested, particularly if you've got directors who put forward different methods of appraising investments. So you need to be able to look at the strengths and weaknesses of payback, of discounted payback, accounting rate of return, net present value, and the IRR, and in addition the modified IRR. So they would lend themselves to a narrative answer, which is what we have to give. Then the final bullet point on the indicative content is the prioritisation of projects. We know about capital rationing, well, we should do, from our P2 studies, and so you'd be looking at probably soft capital rationing, in other words, the capital rationing that is imposed within the company. Possible it could be that we simply can't raise the funds, but normally if we can, then if we've got a positive present value, a net present value, then we can normally raise the funds through borrowing. So the idea of using your capital rationing knowledge, and again, these are all non-calculations, so that you'd be doing the explanation of what the calculations are. So that's the P2 syllabus, and I do think that that's the stronger area, and the area which I think you may well be surprised to see how much that got tested in May, and how much I think that's going to get tested again in August. The other area which relates to our topic today is in the F2 syllabus, and here it's in F2A part 2 really. I mean, sure, I've left in the part 1 bit, which is to do with the sources of long-term finance, because they are fundamental to capital investment appraisal, but it's the weighted average cost of capital which is in general used as the discount rate for standard projects, for projects that don't vary from the norm. So the business is in servers and HPCs, and sure, if they are continuing to produce this kind of work, and they're carrying out a project which is within their normal area of business, then it would make sense for their discount rate to be based on their weighted average cost of capital. But if they are moving away from their normal area of activity, then the weighted average cost of capital would be an inappropriate basis for the discount rate, and they would need to look at other ways of coming up with a discount rate that they can apply to future cash flows. Here's the indicative content. So certainly within the discount rate areas, you've got the cost of equity, you've got the after-tax cost of borrowing from the bank, and the post-tax cost of convertible bonds and yield to maturity bonds. Maybe they say that that everything can be tested, but I would think that this WACC and its use is probably more in line with a case study exam, and that the post-tax cost of borrowing and the yield to maturity would tend to fit the F2 OT instead. Right, so we've looked now at the syllabus content. Now we're looking at what sort of questions. A repeat really of what I've said already, that I'm not expecting any calculations, but if you think it's going to help your answer, then do it. Don't do calculations to show off that you can do them, because it's just absorbing your time and it's not going to earn you any marks. But if you can do the odd calculation here or the odd calculation there that may well help in an argument that you're presenting, then that's fine, and you will be rewarded for that. I'll repeat that so that it's clear. If you've chosen to do a calculation and it's relevant and it fits the answer to the question that they've asked you, you will be rewarded by given marks for the calculation that you've done, even though the official line is that you don't have to do calculations. Right. Explanations are what they will be looking for. So think about what goes on when you do an NPV calculation. I can see I've got the chat box open, so I can see nobody's sort of challenged and said, "Oh, I don't know what this is." So I'm assuming that you all know. Cash flows, absolutely vital. If you don't have the right cash flows, if your market research team perhaps, or your procurement team or production team haven't done a thorough investigation of what the cash flows would be for this particular project, then you're entering the area which is sometimes described as garbage in, garbage out, because the calculation of the net present value depends on accurate forecast cash flows. They're not necessarily going to be correct, but they need to be as good as they possibly can be in the circumstances of when you're making the decision. It doesn't help if they are just guesses. They need to be a very good assessment. The time period, I made a bit of a fuss about this again before, and I'll do it again, that you need to look at what the investment is and be very clear in your own mind about exactly what time period it's covering. A lot of technology is for quite a short period of time. If you think about a lot of the technology, the mobile telephones and the sort of Chromebooks and so on, they have quite a short period during which you're going to be able to generate an income from them. It may be that you simply move from one product to the next, and you're using the same basic costs, but you need to establish that. Otherwise, some of these products may well need a longer period of time for them to generate the net present value or to pay back, and the likelihood is that they won't have that long period of time. So keep thinking about servers, keep thinking about what's going on at Spark Space. Don't give the examiner a generic, I know all about capital investment appraisal type answer, because you might know all about capital investment appraisal, but they don't want to know it. They want to know about capital investment appraisal in the context of Spark Space. The discount rate, yes, I was talking about that a minute ago. It's absolutely vital, because it's the rate at which we are discounting our future cash flows. So if we've got the wrong discount rate, then we're going to have garbage out, aren't we? We're not going to get the net present value that we need for making the decision. And I talked about non-quantitative factors, other reasons why we might want to go ahead with a financial project that may well conflict with a pure financial net present value assessment, and also the idea of the real options. So these could well be require explanations. Right, I'll do a quick, I hope, do you have any questions for me? Okay, so I hope this is helping, and do you have any questions for me? Go on into the chat box. I'll keep an eye on that. You're very welcome to make your contributions now, but while you're doing that, I'll just start a little bit by reviewing what's been going on recently. And here I just want you to see that how big a deal this is. In this column, and my apologies for the small size of the font, Trust, I wasn't planning actually. Trust has asked me a question: do I plan to expand on how real options will be applicable to Spark Space investment options? I wasn't. I mean, if I talk about the idea that Spark Space could be asked to produce a server for a government body in Northland or in Eastland, then they may consider that the net present value of that project is marginal. It may be that they think, well, we're making a very small net present value out of it. It's not the best thing in the world. And then they might pause and they might say, well, actually, what the Northland government has said is that there will be the opportunity for us to then do a second project for them after we've completed the first one, or there will be the possibility that we could be doing more servers for more government areas within Northland, should we wish. And what that gives us is the real option. So just so that hopefully trust this is making sense. We've got these three areas that we can deal with within real options. The real option to follow on, so for the sake of argument, we take on some work for the Northland Meteorological Department, which happens to be a government department, and we do the work for them. And at the time when we were negotiating for that work, the government said, well, we know that you're not entirely sure about whether you really want to take on this particular project, but what we will do is we will write into the contract that the successful completion of this contract will give you the right to then be able to come up with the servers for our National Health Service, and that's the follow-on investment opportunity. But because it's an option, we don't have to follow on. We could stop at that stage, in other words, abandon, or we could, even if it's contracted, we could say we're not going to start it straight away, we're going to wait, and then next year we will consider it again and perhaps do it. I hope that I'm not trying to avoid giving you these answers, but I hope that's sufficient, that it meets your needs. All right, these are the tasks that we had in May. Just before I go through it, I'm just going to have a quick check to see who's in my participant list. Not as many as yesterday. Wilfred, Charles, Suchi, Community, and as well. Okay. Right, here, as you can see, I'm using in the middle the criteria, the business P2 criteria, C1, which is the part of the P2 syllabus that I think is the big deal. Also, the F2 syllabus area A2, but look at this. P2 C1 appeared in variant 1, in variant 2, P2 C1, in variant 3, P2 C1, in variant 4, P2 C1. So it's turned up 4 times in the May exams, and if we look at the F2A2, that turned up twice. Oh, what? I don't think it is A2. I think it's A1. F2A1 turned up twice. So you've got here discussion of the suitability of WACC, and here some implications of funding by debt, which is worth me talking about, although I am sort of more concerned that we get to grips with the whole net present value aspect. But yes, I think that the how it's funded is important, and it's certainly part of my agenda. So there's been a pilot study for a particular capital investment project. Sure, in May we were dealing with a chain of opticians, whereas this time we're dealing with a server manufacturer. Excuse me, I'm just pouring out some more water. But we can have the same kind of question where there's been a pilot study of a particular server application that we may well be considering, and we would then have to evaluate the information to support the project appraisal. So we are discussing the findings. Right, let me just show you Oh no, let me read on and look at the second one, and then I'll show you the examiner's feedback on this so that you can see the sorts of things that the candidates have been doing in the past. Okay. The second one was discussing the suitability. Should they be using weighted average cost of capital in a particular calculation, and how relevant is a net present value in a particular final decision? Okay, so those are the first two, and they both appeared in variant 1. They were both in variant 1. It was in section 3, and it was element 1 and element 2. Between the two of them, that added up to 25% of the marks on the first variant. Well, this is what the examiner had to say. There were some very good answers here where candidates carefully reviewed the data in the tables provided. So they give you the tables, and this is how it's assessed. In the P2 exam, you do the sums. In the management case study, you review the sums that somebody else has done, and mention that the budget was fixed each month and the actual sales were lower at the start than budgeted, so they had additional areas to criticise. Weaker candidates didn't look at this level of detail, instead they focused on it. So here you can see that if you're going to be successful, you've got to get into the detail, and you've got to recognise what's going on a month-by-month basis, if it's a monthly cash flow. And the actual sales were lower at the start than the budget had said that they would be. So immediately you've got this idea that the cash isn't coming in fast enough. Weaker candidates didn't look at this level of detail. Instead, they focused on the overall sales increase of the product and the customers paying for the same day service, which were the figures provided to them rather than having to interpret the table. So my advice to you is, don't tell your marker what they know already. Interpret it and explain why it's important. That would relate to the first part. So just taking us back, that's discussing the findings from the pilot study. The next one was to do with the candidates were asked to consider if a net present value was necessary and the use of WACC. Most answers were biased in focusing on NPV and not WACC. I think that this may well be a problem with some of the tuition providers. I'm awfully sorry. But WACC is a new topic within the F2 syllabus, and unless you've studied it, it makes it very difficult for you to be able to answer it. And if some tuition providers had overlooked the fact that WACC was now an F2 subject, then you can understand why some of their learners didn't have that in their memories to be able to deal with it. So in terms of the NPV, most candidates stated that it should be done, but the weak candidates didn't say why. Hopefully, if you've been listening to me for the last, this is the third of 3 nights, we are committed to making a comment and saying why, all the way, even if it means we've got to start another paragraph, because explaining why a point is relevant is what earns us the marks. So those candidates just launched into a description of how NPV calculations work. Right. Your examiner is unlikely to reward that kind of description. They want to see a justification of the information rather than a description which becomes rather textbooky, it becomes rather generic, and we need all our answers to be specific to Spark Space. There were a few good answers for WACC, but they were not common. So a good hint there, make sure that you are up to date with your WACC knowledge and that you understand its application in terms of the types of projects that the business is undertaking. Right. The second variant asked for a discussion of commercial and cash flow implications of a buyout. Okay, the buyout was that we were looking at the management buying out part of their particular business. So again, this could happen at Sparkspace. Would be interesting. We are a subsidiary of a parent company, so it's quite possible that a combination of the management of part of Sparkspace and external funding may well approach the board of the parent company with a view to carrying out a buyout. Now, here in the second section, the candidates were told that the manager of the research and development facility had proposed a buyout. Research and development is a big deal to this examiner, as you can tell from the research and development that Sparkspace is carrying out. They were asked to discuss the risks to IC Optical, which is the name of that company that was in the May exam, of the proposed arrangement. Many candidates combined a discussion of risks, commercial and cash flow implications, which was acceptable, although there was little focus on cash flows. So make sure that when you're looking at cash flows. Some candidates misinterpreted the question and discussed the risks to the buyout team, although the requirement was very clearly stated. This demonstrates the importance of reading the question very carefully, and candidates were then asked to focus on the commercial and cash flow implications of the proposal. Better candidates demonstrated good awareness of the potential commercial impact of the new arrangement. So here, another way in which capital investment appraisal could be tested and could be tested again. I think it's sufficiently useful. Oh, I can't see it here. I was going to show you, or maybe it's in here. That's variant 1. Okay. My apologies. I was going to try and show you the question just so that we can see what they're getting at when they were saying about some of the candidates not answering the question properly, and the possibility of misunderstanding and answering the wrong question. You see, I might have to just stop the screen sharing for a minute while I quickly pull up. But it gives you an opportunity, if you've got any questions, to raise them. Okay. If you were here yesterday and you were aware that I crashed out about 15 minutes early, I've made provisions for tonight to make sure that doesn't happen again. Okay, I'll be with you very, very soon. I'm just pulling up variant 2 to show you what they are referring to when they say that the candidates misunderstood what the question was, and to give you the opportunity to check with me, because I think question recognition is vital. If you don't understand what the question is, it makes it very hard for you to be able to answer it. And I'm so keen on you writing the answer to the question that's been asked that I think it's beholden upon me to make sure that you understand what the question is. So I've now got that on my screen. I haven't quite put it onto sharing yet. Okay, here we go. So let's go back and let's share the screen. So I hope you can all see this. This is not ideal. Okay. A month has passed since the posters were put up. Alex Spinner asks you to step into his office. Marcus Lim, the manager of the Research and Development Facility, has responded to our suggestions concerning the motivation of his staff by proposing a buyout. This would be simple to achieve, as the facility is already a wholly owned subsidiary within IC Optical. The proposal is that the management team of the facility would raise the necessary cash to buy it as a going concern. We know which employees work in research and development are located at a separate site, which can be included in the sale. Therefore, it would be relatively simple for us to agree a price and permit the facility to trade as a separate entity. We've had a attached memorandum of understanding, and I need your thoughts on the risks for IC Optical of this arrangement. Particularly, I would like you to focus on the commercial and cash flow implications. So, the reason for me pulling this up is really to try and draw your attention. I need your thoughts on the risks for IC Optical, in other words, the company that we are, of this arrangement. So imagine that there was a question on your exam that said the risks for Spark Space of a buyout of the what they're called now, Innovate, Spark Innovate, the area where they're carrying out the Spark Innovate, which is the R&D area. So I hope that seeing that is helpful for you, and you can see why the examiner has really not been is taken against any student any candidate who discussed the risks to the buyout team. They have not been asked that question, so you do need to make sure that you read the question, you understand the question, and that you answer the question that you've been asked. Okay, so that was variant 2. Now we'll look at you were also asked to advise on predicting cash flows, and this was in variant 3. Yes, so we've got in variant 3 we've got two different questions. In section 2 you're asked on predicting cash flows, and on section 3 you're discussing the implications of funding by debt. So here, the first requirement addressed one of the more significant problems associated with project appraisal, namely the cash flows. There is very little point in understanding the various models to evaluate a project if the underlying predictions are unreliable. This is how the case study works. It's far more realistic, because if you can't get reliable forecast values, then you can't make decisions based on them, because you're trying to base your decisions on garbage. Yeah. Arguably, the net present value analysis can be biased through either optimism or pessimism in the forecasting of cash flows. So again, the recognition that the cash flow figures that go into the predictions are vulnerable because of whoever's produced them may have a vested interest, so that they're not necessarily the most useful and the most accurate that they could be. Many candidates simply describe techniques. Now, again, we had this a few minutes ago. The description of techniques such as NPV, without attempting to answer the question, will not earn you any marks. You have to be giving answers applied, in our case, to Sparkspace. Task 3. Answers to the first requirement were good. Fine. I think the one that we're looking at, though, is the second requirement. Yeah. Section 2. Element 1. Okay. It is a good one. Okay. Candidates are able to demonstrate an understanding of the impact of borrowing on the overall cost of capital. So, obviously, you need to be aware of the tax shield and the fact that you're able to bring the weighted average cost of capital down by using debt finance. Good arguments teased out the fact that borrowing tends to be relatively inexpensive compared to equity, but increased borrowing makes the entity more highly geared, and so the overall impact on WACC can be complicated. Relatively few candidates address the question of future flexibility, the point being that most entities have a limited borrowing capacity, and exhausting that will make it more difficult to raise further debt in the future. And of course that is very much the case, that we need to be recognising that it's all very well coming up with a super project, and it's all very well being able to demonstrate that that project has a positive net present value. But if we can't get the funds for some reason, if there's some sort of capital rationing from the banks, or we're in a situation where we're not able to go onto the debt market and raise the money, then we will have a problem. We are a subsidiary of a parent company. We don't know a lot more, any more than that. We're also very heavily in debt as it is. So it may be that we tend to borrow from the parent company. We haven't been told that. But we do have a very high gearing already, which may make borrowing more difficult for Sparkspace because of that. Okay, moving on. The final one was in variant 4, where we had in section 1, element 2, discuss the basis for setting rental. So the second part of the task, which is the one that we're looking for, so the second part of the task asks for a discussion of a set of figures offered as part of a negotiation. It's hardly surprising that the figures appeared to favour the party who prepared them. So an interesting return to the same topic that we looked at a minute ago, which is that when they are producing a set of figures, then the party who produces them has a vested interest and tends to produce figures that favour whatever it is that the decision that they want you to make. A good answer should have identified ways in which the figures may be distorted by their prospective business partner, and the candidate should have addressed this concern by considering the logic underlying the figures. So again, they're not looking for you to make a description of figures. Oh, sorry. Anyone else? Anyone else not able to hear me? As well, they can't hear me. I'll just make sure that I haven't accidentally missed the audio. No, it seems to be going backwards. Oh, Trust can. I think it. Right. So, just so that I can just respond to as well, Lee. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, so if you can't hear me now, oh, you can. Oh, that wasn't necessary. Anyway, I was able to see that the recording is still got the little green bars, getting lit up. So the second part of the task asks for discussion of, so the good answer should have identified the ways in which the figures may be distorted. So you need to be well aware of manipulation by vested interests. So you're not being sucked into the actual calculation itself, but you're sitting back and looking at it and making a judgment in your own mind as to whether you feel that the calculations that are being carried out are being carried out accurately. Okay. Now, I haven't set you a homework, but I feel entitled to set you a homework. This is a repetition of the points, but again, we saw from the examiner's own feedback on those tasks that were set in May of why it's so important that you make relevant application to, in our case, Sparkspace, and every time you make a point, you justify it by saying why it's an appropriate point. Well, we've not been brilliant homework doers, but this time we've got a little bit more time in which to do our homework. You don't have another class with me until Monday of next week, and as today is Wednesday, that gives you more opportunity, should you choose to use it, to address particular points. If we're going to look at capital investment appraisal in the context of Sparkspace, we need to think of where the capital investment appraisal might take place. We could have Sandra Villette as the operations director. She may well have just looking at it in terms of the day's liftoff chipset that we're doing as a collaboration with Memo Chip, but yeah, has entrepreneurial organization. So I've typed out off the top of my head a possible question that I think, that I'm hoping anyway, is forcing you to keep your application in the terms of SparkSpace very much alive, and I think if you can write about SparkSpace collaborating with an entrepreneurial organisation, so I've had it in such a way that these people provide the ideas but they don't provide the dosh, we have to provide the finance, and I've been a little bit vague in terms of whether in the server market that we are serving. Presumably they are, if it's something which is so distinctive that we are not able to do it without this entrepreneurial organisation, then it certainly sounds a little bit like a little bit of differentiation. And that may mean that you would want to address a little bit of additional risk, and then it gives you an opportunity to talk about various ways of dealing with risk. So I'm going to say include how investment appraisal I think again this is a similar sort of exercise to the one that I set last night. So I'd be looking again at a this will be worth 12.5 marks. So that's equal to 22.5 minutes. And I would be recommending plan for 5 to 6 minutes. You may now be finding that your plans are getting bigger, in which case you are needing to allocate more time to it, and then and I think I've already got a slide on here which is about the technique. Let me just quickly check. No, it isn't. So I'll just jot down the key things. Sparspace, we've not heard of them yet. Sparkspace, that's more like it. Right, so So what I've just typed in there says, are you clear about the task, and can I clarify what is needed? Is there any ambiguity about it? I mean, sure, any kind of capital investment appraisal question is always valuable. As you can see, the May 2016 exam was fairly typical in terms of the nature of this particular topic. It's a big deal in P2, and so it was turning up in all of those exams that we looked at. Okay. I'm assuming from the fact that I haven't had any what do you mean by this, or shall we do that type questions, that you are reasonably clear about the task requirement, which I think is quite nice, because it gives me a chance then to use the remaining 10 minutes to look at the financial statements in the pre-scene. Okay, so I've got the wrong one. So let's get the pre-scene up, and so we start by looking at the financial statement for the profit and loss account for Spark Space. We can see that they've had some growth, that there's been a 9% growth in revenue. They're generating a gross profit margin of 38% here. They're getting a gross profit margin over here of 36%. So it's it shows improvement, and they hold it over the operating profit, so that in the operating profit percentage they're dealing with 35% and 33%. So you can see the business is doing quite well in terms of its profitability. So we are well aware that we're dealing with a business which is I'm putting 35 when I mean 33. It's going through good growth, and they would no doubt be expecting to see the growth continue, and certainly down here to have profit after tax in the 20% area is very good. The server business doesn't seem to be a high risk business, so I think that the holding company, the parent company that owns Spark Space, must be very pleased with their investment if they're able to generate 20% plus after the tax from the revenue. Right. So now looking at here, and I know that there are different ways of working out gearing, and I'm going to just look at gearing here because I think gearing is significant in the context of investment appraisal, because this is what can constrain further borrowing. So if I do, I'm going to show the gearing, and I'll use my ratio is going to be total. I'm going to use total well, in this case it's loans. Very simple company, there's no deferred tax or anything like that getting in the way. So I'm looking at total loans. As it happens, we don't have any short-term loans, which could be an issue, because that is often one of the ways in which a firm that has a problem with its with raising debts may well raise short-term loans simply because they can't get any more long-term loans. But here we're only dealing with long-term loans, and I will have on the bottom is total equity plus total loans. So looking at this, I've now got in the 2015 figures, which of course start on the 1st of October 2014. I'll go to the and in here we've got 3 billion, isn't it? 3088 million divided, well, if I can guess it to and I made it 4499, yeah, as our total of the equity and loans, which I think is a 68.6% gearing ratio, which is very high. Over 2/3 of over 2/3 of the finance is borrowed. Now, we don't know where it's been borrowed from. So it's possible that that is a loan from the parent company. So be well aware before jumping to conclusions that that can happen, that we may well have the holding company, the parent company, has simply lent money to Sparkspace, and that's why they have such a high level of gearing. And they were previously 70%. But certainly if they were looking to go outside the organisation to raise funds, such a high level of gearing would put off prospective lenders, because they would be worried that Sparkspace would not be able to honour the debt, and then they wouldn't be able to repay it. So I think that that's a point well worth taking note of. Right. Let me now return. Before I return, I'll just take this through over the next couple of pages. You've got bits and pieces here where this is how we could use our assets to underpin any borrowing. but the chances are that with such a high level of borrowing already, we may have already used our property, plant and equipment as security for existing loans. Other points.